Now that we've seen some paradigm example, and remember the word paradigm is kind of the perfect examples of things that we all agree are good arguments, and some that we agree, and all that we agree are not such good arguments. I think we can make a conclusion, or we can come to certain conclusions in general about what characteristics a good argument has, and obviously an argument that fails to have these characteristics is not a good argument. But the two characteristics that a good argument has are, first of all, that there is a good connection, or what we're going to call logically strong connection between the premises and the conclusions. The idea is, when we're talking about logic itself, although in the course we're teaching logic, and we sometimes use logic as argument analysis, that the logic part of it really focuses in on the connections, or the connection or connections between the premises and the conclusion. The idea is the premises, you might say, in quote, lead logically to the conclusion. And then the second characteristic, the idea is, so far we know that a good argument, the premises actually really do lead you to the conclusion. And if you think about it, we need, if we're being led to a good conclusion, there's a good connection, we need something else, though. We have to start with good premises. The premises are sort of the foundation on which the arguments build. So if you start with good premises and you have a good connection between the premises and the conclusion, kind of the higher floors of the house, we have a good, strong argument, a logically strong argument. Now we're going to introduce some terminology that we're going to be using throughout the course, and that is, when we talk about the logical connection, the logically strong connection between premises and conclusion, we say the argument is valid. Now let's be very careful of one thing. In English, and this is kind of a recurring theme, something that we've talked about in the past. In English, words have multiple meanings, and valid has multiple meanings. In the course, when we say the argument is valid, we mean that there is a logically strong connection between the premises and the conclusion. In English, sometimes people say, oh, gee, you use the word valid in this way. Oh, gee, that's a valid point. What they mean is it's a good point. Maybe it's a correct point. It's a true point. Arguments are not true and false. We'll look at that word in a second. When we use valid in the course, and when you're talking about arguments, I think from now on you should make a habit of it. Valid just applies to that connection between the premises and the conclusion. Doesn't tell you about whether the premises are correct. Doesn't tell you anything about whether the conclusion's correct. It just tells you about the logical relationship between the premises and conclusion. The idea is, if you're going to accept the premises, then you're going to be bound by sort of the rules of being a rational person to accept the conclusion. And we talk about good premises, we're going to be talking about true premises, and we'll actually spend some time later on in the course looking at what we mean by this concept of truth, because actually in philosophy it's become somewhat controversial as to what it means that it has true premise, what truth means. And based on this, we're going to replace, notice we've been talking, and look at the top of the page, a good argument. We're going to have a technical term for a good argument that we're going to introduce. We're going to say a good argument is a sound argument. And this is D4. I think I'm following the numbering in the book. It is, an argument is sound if and only if two conditions are correct. The first, it's valid in the sense that we just defined, and the second one is all of its premises are true. Another way of putting that is the conjunction of its premises are true. So now we said, look, we now understand what a good argument is. It's one where there's a logically strong connection between the premises and the conclusion, and we'll be looking at what makes a logically strong connection. And the second one, it has good premises, and like a house, you start with true premises, you have a good foundation, you're building the supporting walls, which is kind of the logic. Then you end up with the supporting walls are like the validity, the logical connection between the foundation and the higher floors. And when you build a house like that, you have a good house, you have a good argument, you have a sound argument.